country will find out today whether Moody's will downgrade our credit rating to junk status. Moody's is the only one of the big three ratings agencies that still has the country at investment grade. So Devan Murugan from eNCA's Money Desk takes us through where we stand at the moment. Devan, thanks very much for coming in. I mean, even the finance minister calling for prayers over this potential downgrade.
Absolutely. Things don't look good. That's the remark coming out of him yesterday, and that's a direct quote, by the way, as he hoped that we could at least keep our last investment grade rating from Moody's. In all likelihood, Michelle, experts believe that our outlook will change from stable to negative before we actually get downgraded in terms of the actual credit rating. But that puts us at the very edge, and the next move in the next few months could be an investment grade lapse, in other words, falling into junk status. So, the big question, Michelle, is why are we here? I mean, what do they actually look for when they actually do the downgrading? Let me just jump in there and explain. Well, this is what Moody's will ponder on. And they've been pondering on for the last few weeks when it comes to what are the different factors that they look at. First of all, what did we hear this week? That our growth rate is not as it should be to create jobs. So what does a rating agency do? It typically assesses the country's ability to pay back debt, a credit risk of the country, if you like. And this week's midterm budget confirmed that the economy is unhealthy on many fronts. Our economy is not growing, as I said, and if that doesn't happen, then less tax revenue to government coffers, and they've argued in the past that growth-enhancing policies are not being implemented. The other big factor that's considered is this heavy bag being carried by this animated individual. Let's say that's South Africa. The debt is becoming unsustainable. The budget expects debt to GDP ratio to exceed 70% in the next 3 years. Anything above 60%, Michelle, we should worry about. Moody's will also take a look at what we are spending on, and that's represented on that expenditure icon there. As it stands, so much money is going out to either bailouts and consumption spending like wages. Michelle, we should be spending more on investment capital. That sets the tone for a growth spending, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, all of these big economic terms, you know, GDP versus growth, investment grade, all of those things perhaps are difficult concepts for most of us, if we're not from the eNCA Money Desk, to understand. What I would want to know is, how does that affect me tonight if Moody's, whatever decision it makes, how does that affect me as a taxpayer?
And the answer to that lies in a sequence of potential events that could happen. And this is what it looked like. Let's assume we go into junk status. What happens is that the government would lose its place in the World Bond Government Index. I mean, that would mean that investors would be compelled to exit our bonds. And you could see outflows as much as 200 billion rand. The rand will then weaken. And what happens when the rand weakens? Inflation goes up. The cost of borrowing escalates, not just for government, but for ordinary folk as well. For example, interest rates will then see a dramatic rise as inflation rises. And what happens? The affordability of actually buying a car, buying a house, paying loans on that, then escalates. And then at the end of the day, when you have such a high interest rate environment where businesses and households cannot cope, you see that jobs taking a bit of a hit. I need not tell you, with a 29.1% job loss, 38% if you consider the expanded definition of unemployment, that's the last thing we need. So that's the consumer trail, a very painful one if we are downgraded.
Well, let's join the finance minister there as he calls for prayers in the wake of that decision by Moody's. Thanks very much for that, Devan Murugan from the eNCA Money Desk.